Hello, everyone. So today, I was asked to talk about the Decentralized Developer Toolbox. Petros from Block 16, we're a crypto venture studio. We help with consulting, and then we also do a lot of building in-house tools and tools to make the Ethereum ecosystem better. But anyway, to get started, when I was first asked to do this, I kind of thought this would be a bit of a dry topic. But as I thought deeper into it, tools are kind of abstract, and also they're very important to an ecosystem. So we'll just get started. We'll go, why are tools so important? The best tools can help make your ecosystem and your product or whatever you're doing the de facto, the best one to go to. Years ago, for an example, I was doing, before blockchain, web development. I was just doing e-commerce sites and things like that. PayPal used to be the way to go, but their kind of API and their tools and their documentation was so terrible that years later, when Stripe came along, they just swept up the market because it was so simple and easy to use, and developers just went toward it. So if you have the best tools, developers will go toward your platform and make it flourish and better. In my opinion, Ethereum and Solidity are starting to have a growing wave of tools coming along. I went to DevCon last year, and the tools that were coming out from, a lot of it was from consensus, but they're helping the ecosystem grow, and it's making a lot of things better. In my opinion, EOS has a long way to go in terms of getting these kinds of tools, the developer tools, to allow the platform to grow, and that's why Ethereum kind of has an edge right now. So I was also asked to talk about, if you're a non-developer, what would be the way to start. So the best way to start is the Truffle suite, obviously. A lot of people have talked about it already, so I won't go too in-depth into it. Basically, Truffle, easiest way, you can install it with NPM. Simple way to just go in, start developing. You can get a scaffolding for your application, run tests, have a console. You can migrate it onto the network. They have a lot of documentation. It's very easy to use. It's great. Ganache is kind of a newer tool. It's a GUI for what used to be TestRPC, running your own private blockchain on the network, on your own computer. It's an easy way to test your applications in a controlled environment. And also, there's now with the GUI, you have the ability to go on a transaction level. It's very easy to change settings. You can do auto mining or have testing like a real network, have 15-second block times, whatever kind of settings you need. People have talked about Drizzle at this conference too. Drizzle is basically a tool to surround your front end, it's a Redux store. It allows you easier access to syncing with your smart contract, and it kind of takes care of the heavy work that used to be something you would have to do. Now, a little bit into Solidity IDEs too. There's web-based IDEs and application IDEs. If you're very, very beginning, just starting out, the best way to do it, if you've ever used JS Fiddle, you're the developer at all, there's ETH-Fiddle, which is just a simple browser-based way to run and compile code. They have a way to test it. It makes it very simple. And then once you kind of played around with it and you graduate onto that, you should try the Remix IDE, because it is getting toward a full-featured IDE for developing and analyzing and testing your code in Solidity. It's all web-based. The one thing I would mention, just because for security, you should always download a copy and use a local version of Remix. Then just the applications, you have all your standard IDEs, like JetBrains is IntelliJ, which is great. It's a full-fledged IDE, and you have a IntelliJ Solidity, which is basically a plugin that builds in, gives you your syntax highlighting, makes it easier to use. There's also Ether Atom, which allows you to do many of the same things Remix does, but on a local machine in Atom, if that's your favorite way to develop. Now we're going to talk about something more deeper, is accessing Ethereum via APIs. A lot of people have mentioned Infura. It's basically they host parity nodes for you. They allow an easy way for you to access the network, hosted full nodes. So you can use it normally with Web3.js. You just do a HTTP provider, and you get full access to it. It's very simple. And then all the normal things you would do. They also offer IPFS gateways, which is great. IPFS is still getting there, but it's going to be good to have that kind of thing. So at Block 16, one of the things we've been working on is an API that basically allows you to, instead of having to do 250 to 500 HTTP calls on JSON RPC on the Ethereum network, we've basically taken a parity node, ripped it apart, downloaded the 230 gigabytes of raw transaction data, and put it into a database. And we're continually updating it. Going deeper into it, right now we have endpoints that allow you to access full information on blocks. You get all of the events, transactions, all of these things that allow you to analyze it better. You can also view a history of a address. You can see the token transfers, and we're developing an Ethereum interface like Mu, basically, to it, and it has this history function, so you can easily see what transactions your account has done. Use cases too, since it's an API, you can develop back-end systems. You can pull all this data, you can watch it, monitor it from a back-end system if you need to do some kind of hybrid application. If you want to check it out, we have API docs at docs.block16.io. Going next, another thing to think about is like tools aren't just these like JavaScript libraries. They're actually smart contracts in Solidity. You have all of these canonical smart contracts being developed because the thought process is if you write any of your own code that hasn't been audited, you need to get it audited. Audits are expensive. So if you can reuse code that's been audited multiple times, it makes your life a lot easier. So OpenZeppelin, I'm sure everyone who's been developing for a while knows about them. They have tons of free audited smart contracts you can use and integrate into your platform. A less well-known one is DApp Tools. They're the people behind MakerDAO. And they've developed some really hardcore tools. The most interesting one, which we'll get into more later, is the proxy contract. The proxy contract allows you to do multiple steps of what would normally be multiple Ethereum transactions to do something in one succinct transaction because you're acting as the sender through it. So going into it also, the thing about smart contracts as tools is with normal application development, if you want to get access to a system that someone's developed, they would need to open an API for you. But the difference with Ethereum development is you start from the standpoint that the API is already there. It's the ABI, obviously. It's free, open to use. Anyone can access someone else's application through their own smart contract. So all you do, basically, these next generation smart contracts will use interfaces. It's just an easy contract abstraction to see what a contract would be. Anyone who's deployed this contract following this protocol, the abstraction, can go and use it. And we'll go into a case study a little bit in a second. But these proxy contracts, too, I mentioned they send bytecode and data for the sender, and they use the interfaces to interact with these other contracts, too. So we're going to look at Oasis Direct, which is basically, it's an exchange, but it's a way to do atomic swaps. It does all of the steps of a normal exchange for you, and it uses these two interfaces in the contract code. So they have an OTC interface, which basically allows them to access and buy and sell on their other smart contract, and they're interfacing it from this proxy contract. And then they also have the WETH, the wrapped ETH interface. And this interface is like, I'm sure if you've used it before, you understand what wrapped Ether is. It's a way to make Ether onto the ERC20 standard. And it allows for easier swapping between tokens, and it's generally used in these DEXs nowadays. But so the idea is the flow of it is basically if you did a normal went on radar relay, you would convert your Ether to WETH. That's a transaction. You would go send your thing. You would get it cleared. You would do your trade, and then that would be another transaction, and it would send you your whatever token you're going into. But with this proxy contract, all of this is done in one transaction. This happens for you simultaneously in the background based on a smart contract, and they access these other smart contracts, which are their tools to do the thing for you. So basically the point I'm trying to make is smart contracts are tools. As Ethereum grows, as more developers put dApps on the network, you can use them, you can build on them, and you can do creative things with them like you couldn't do before. So it's a growing network. That's it. Thank you for your time. I'm Petros Ring. If you have any questions you want to talk to, thank you.